Welcome, everyone. Our esteemed president, Dr. Sean Eversley Bradwell, cannot be with us this evening. So I will endeavor to do my best to fill his very large shoes. So the first item that we have, which is going to come before public comment and student comment, is the presentation by the people from the Lehman Alternative School regarding the Spanish trip proposed for this May. So come on back.
Why do we need school board? They cut. We can't. Raise it, so it's basically just local states.
That's something. I really wish I had some of that state. That's
Yeah, I figured.
Hi, we're a group of LACS students here to represent the LACS Spanish trip from May 27th to May 25th. We're going to be going to Granada, Spain. We chose Granada because it's safe, walkable, and historic.
While we're in Granada, we want to stay in homestays, visit historical sites, and take Spanish lessons.
Okay, for our budget, what we have projected right now is $2,200 to $2,400 per person in our trip. 1,250 of those dollars will be airfare. Lessons, meals, and our tours will be $729, and ground transportation will be $70. Right now, our fundraising has been a school dance, which made about $1,000, a gimme coffee sale, which made about $1,000, childcare at Fall Creek, which we've done one so far, and we're doing another one later this month. We have a silent auction coming up, citrus sale, and our projected earnings will be $10,000 to $15,000.
All right, so just to make sure, this is a school function and we are going to stick to all district guidelines. Nobody is going anywhere alone at any point. All the families are vetted and known, as it says up here. So on the slide, I guess for those of you who can't see it, I'll say we've got a contact person, Claudia Barque Iglesias, on site to assist. We're going to be staying in pairs and triads. Phones have international plans to call locally and internationally as needed, and trip insurance is available for $40 per person. Thank you. Oh, it's not working? Yeah, that's most of it. Yeah.
Do we have any questions or comments about this?
How many people will be able to go total?
I think it's 24 students, 2 staff.
24.
And the fundraising piece is super, super vital because we have to make sure that this trip is accessible for all people who want to join.
So the homestay, will you be staying with students, who go to a particular school that you've connected with, or?
The homestays are vetted through the institute. What day is the language institute that we're going to be working with, the language school. They have several schools around the country. We're going to be working with the school in Vermont.
Okay.
So they work with homestay families that they're familiar with, and that most of the everybody will be within walking distance of the institute.
Nice. And so will students be staying with, doing homestays for the entire time?
It will be, except the very last night. We need to leave from the last Friday to because they fly from leave to they pay is that so we need to have a recommendation.
Yeah, I have a question.
Oh, go ahead.
So although the school goes from 9 to 2 p.m. and there's, what are you gonna do during your siesta time? Because that's a cultural norm.
So the students will go back to, they have board so far that we know, we agreed, and they might go to their homestays to have lunch and then to sleep because, you know, it's kind of a long day and it may be hot, even if it's May. And so this is a time where people really don't do anything in the southern Spain. And then 4 days of that week, we will have already, and it's budgeted, 4 different visits, tours. One is included in La Alhambra, is one of the most famous places, and is a UNESCO, you know, the whole city is a UNESCO World Heritage. So it's pretty planned, you know, it really is. So it is a school trip. Any other question?
Sounds really good.
Thank you.
Sure, you don't need another chaperone.
Oh, we have a list. We have a list.
Granada in October, late September, but I was only there one night, and I really wished I was staying longer because it was fabulous. And we didn't get to go to Alhambra because we didn't book tickets in advance.
Oh, that we know. They're already telling us, and this is since October, that we need to buy it now
Yes.
to have the tickets because we're such a large group. So the thing that is good that we're doing it so early is that any accommodation we're doing is for a lot of people.
Right.
Like the airplane, we're kind of taking the whole airplane, we're taking the whole, school. So the LECA's name is going to be, known in Granada.
So, yeah. Would somebody like to make? Would anyone like to make a motion?
Oh, wait, sorry, what am I not gonna look it up? All right, yeah. I move to approve the international field trip to Spain from May 17th, 2024 to May 25th, 2024, as recommended by the superintendent.
Second?
Thank you. Any discussion? Any more discussion? Okay, let's call the question. All in favor? That's everybody. Thank you very much.
Go to Spain.
Moving on, I don't believe we have anybody signed up for public comment, but, is there anybody who's here for public comment? Here or virtual? So I guess there will be no response to that song. And now we have our student reps, and I see we have a couple new people at the table. So why don't, and I believe they're from LACS. And so why don't you introduce yourselves and speak to us?
Okay.
My name is Leo Scott, and I am a 12th grader at LACS.
Hello, I am Odin, and I'm a junior at LACS.
And go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Stella. I'm a junior at LACS as well.
All right, so you have been duly elected to represent. And what do you want to tell us about goings on?
Okay. So I will be talking about driver's ed program at LACS. Our students have the theoretical ability to get into IHS driver's ed class. However, even IHS students have found it difficult to get into that class. It's full almost all the time, and there's usually not room for any LACS students. And we want our own driver's ed program at LACS or throughout the whole district that's more accessible to our students.
All right.
Okay. Well, a couple of things. Very happy to have them here. I was very happy with how the election process went. Of course, not without its flaws, but very successful for its first time. So welcome, Leo and Odin. I just want to also express how excited I am to be a part of the Spanish trip this year with all these amazing folks. And we also have another very exciting day trip coming up for our high school art classes to go see the Jay-Z exhibit in New York City, which is very exciting. The Jay-Z exhibit. Yeah. We're starting our unit on hip hop culture in honor of the 50th year. And personally, I'm very excited to start that. Something else I wanted to speak on is our murals on our doors being painted over because of fire code. I would love to see the specific law. That's something that we haven't been presented with or been able to find. So we'd really appreciate anyone who could supply that resource. Yeah, I don't think anything else. I'll give it to you, Leah.
Gotcha. I just wanted to talk about how at LACS we have a very wide range of ages, being a middle school and a high school. So we have students who can be as young as 10 and in 6th grade, and students who are as old as 18 or older who are in 12th grade. And just something that came up was that we have this wide range of ages, but we're all served the same foods at lunch for the school lunch. And we were wondering if there's anything that can be done about that to make it so people who are not getting enough food can not be spending their day at school hungry.
Okay. IHS?
Hi, I'm Lucine. I'm a senior. So some updates that we have is that we are currently going forward discussing grading policies and ways that teachers and students can discuss grades more. For example, if a teacher grades an assignment like the last day of the quarter, it can be very difficult for a student to like get feedback and improve upon their work. So we're searching for ways to improve that. Quarter one just ended as of last Thursday, and final grades will be going in tomorrow. So one quarter of the way through the year, yay. Or I don't know if that's a gift for everybody. PSAT scores will be released on Thursday, and that affects juniors and some sophomores. This is the first year that we have really done it digitally. as well as on paper. So shout out to Mr. Barnes for making all that happen. He's awesome. And the last thing is that we are discussing the curbs in the IHS parking lot and the traffic flow. So the curbs in the parking lot, they're very kind of janky at times. They're especially for new drivers. That's the way I've heard it described. Very easy to hit. And in the mornings when there's like cars going by left and right, they can be a little tight to turn on. So we are discussing ways to kind of improve the traffic flow in the in the IHS parking lot in the morning, because having driven there, it is very stressful.
Thank you. Okay,
Hi, everybody. As you know, my name is Cademan. On Monday, the IHS reps to the board met with Dr. Dan Bryman, Ms. Beth Kraus, Jamie Zervos, and Jennifer Doolittle to discuss nutrition at the high school. As I'm pretty sure most of you guys know, we meet on a generally bi-weekly basis with Mr. Trumbull on Mondays, but this Monday Universal Lunch meeting was, they gave us some of their reasoning behind why the new lunch programs have been initiated. Many thanks to Dr. Bradwell for sending us the video presentation regarding the Chef Ann Foundation and nutritional changes, but it was nice to get some of the experts to talk to us in a smaller group setting. We understand a lot of the reasons behind the new nutritional changes. You know, rising rates of childhood obesity and lots of other related health concerns are definitely an issue facing the country right now, and Ithaca. And we did suggest, and we're talking and engaging in dialogue about this, possible sending more clear communication out to the student body. Students might never completely accept the idea because, you know, students will always find something to complain about. But I think it's important, and we believe it's important to have clear communication. So there is a parent FAQ on the website, and we were thinking about possibly reframing that, maybe altering some of the questions and answers in ways that could answer some of students' dilemmas or questions about why they can't eat their cookies at the lunch line anymore, or etc. Also, on a different note, I emailed Mr. Scott Taylor several days ago regarding recycling at the high school. We talked about this last board meeting, if you remember. And I've done a little bit of digging in that sense. I have not received a response yet, but yesterday, talking with Dr. Bryman, we discussed the idea of holding an informal meeting to talk about instituting a labeling campaign, maybe setting up more bins, providing lids for the bins that already exist so that people don't dump food or other waste products in there. And I hope that can be accomplished in the coming days or weeks. I think that would be a great step forward. A lot of it, at this point, a lot of it just has to do with the implementation and figuring out a way to actually go through the theoretical processes we've come up with. Finally, I haven't had a chance to talk with this about Mr. Trumbull yet, but today we had a student council meeting. I'm also on the student council, and I was telling them about some of the nutritional changes. And one thing the student council members at least are particularly annoyed about are the vending machines. Now, I understand why they're closed for most hours of the day, but one suggestion that was brought forward that I will bring up in our next meeting with Mr. Trumbull and hopefully advance is the idea of maybe filling the vending machines with healthier snack options so that students can still use them, but maybe use them in a more responsible way. Thank you.
Yeah. All right, let's see that.
Okay, I'm just gonna, okay, it's on. I just had like a couple questions, or really just one question about the accelerated math program at the middle schools. So I know that this is something that used to be present, at least when I was in middle school. I was at least a part of the accelerated math program. And I know that at least for 6th and 7th graders, I think it's just one math class now. And for 8th graders, there's the Algebra 1 course alongside the companion course. So I was wondering what exactly the reasoning behind these changes was, in particular because I think if somebody is planning on taking Algebra 1 in an 8th grade course, it would make more sense for them to already have a foundation in 6th and 7th grade of maybe some of those topics rather than a companion course at the same time or over the summer.
You. Board responses. Questions or response?
I mean, I have a lot and I don't want to take up too much time doing it, so I'll try to rush through since no one spoke up. I'm sure there's more. One, I want to know where this Jay-Z exhibit is. It's in New York City? Okay, Brooklyn. Awesome. That's exciting. I'm curious too more about the mural that was painted over. Was there reasoning given due to the fire code or?
So from what I've heard, the reasoning is fire code. It's all the murals that are on any door throughout our school. I believe for reasons of, is that not right, Deb? Sorry, correct me, please.
Yeah, it's just certain doors.
Certain
For
doors,
instance,
okay.
there's a door that has a full mural that is the entrance to the boiler room. And so the signage that says boiler room and purpose of that door is, we get dinged on fire code for having that obscured. There's also a door that, you open to get to a lift for ambulatory students that have challenges to get from the floor up into our music room. And that also is obscured. And I believe there's one other door. And we've gotten fire code violation for quite a few years. So, Heather from facilities has been working with us about how we can preserve those murals in a different way. Before they get painted. It's a one solid color. And again, I've been trying to find the fire code, I'm sure one of both these and place in on a specific code, but we don't have that for sure.
Thank you.
It's not all.
Okay. The parking lot, Lucine, you mentioned that, and something that's come up in some of our facilities meetings and in other spaces are most of our parking lots have issues with accessibility. So, people just, I noticed at the high school, people just park in those spaces as if it's like a drop and ride. And so students with difficulty who need them can't use them. And so I hope that's also something that you look at when you're reviewing. Wait, did you mention the parking lot? No. Okay. The nutrition discussion, I think is interesting. And it's not so much a question, but I wanted to comment. I think it's important to, we talk about the obesity epidemic, but body size has nothing to do with health. And a lot of the conversations that we had when discussing the changes to the menu is equity and making sure students could think clearly. And with high sugar diets, it's really not great for our bodies or our brains. And it doesn't have to do with body size. I'm really excited about the recycling and I hope we can get more updates. And the parking, the driver's ed. I don't know if someone here can address that, but I'm curious to hear how that can change.
Jumping on a couple of those comments too. I don't have any answers, but the LACS situation where people aren't getting, are you saying that people aren't getting enough food because some people require more food or want to have more food at lunch? And what is the protocol now? Like if you get your meal and you want to eat more, can you go back and get more?
No, you can't go back.
Okay.
You just get one.
So I guess the question would be, how
can-
are portion sizes
Yeah.
determined and whether or not age, which is what you specifically spoke to, is part of that determination?
Right.
Something we would need to explore.
Or are there extra helpings? Like, does the food run out? Like when everybody's had one lunch, if there's more food, can one go back and get more lunch? Or I don't know how it works exactly, so I'd like to know.
We had a nutrition meeting this week with Jamie Dervis, Miss Beth Kraus, and Jennifer Doolittle. So what they explained to us is that there is a USDA approved caloric input and input for different nutrients that is generally like recommended by the state, and that they have to account for when they are providing lunches, and that this year the amount of approved sodium and sugar has also gone down, which kind of does limit options in a way. So what they have to do is, yes, obviously there's a caloric difference between, you know, what someone like my age eats and what a 10-year-old would eat, but it's not incredibly large, so they don't have a large margin to work with. So that's kind of what we were told, and also shout out to them because they are awesome. Okay, thanks.
I just wonder, on either the lunch menu options or the driver's ed, have any of you made connections with anybody in administration about those issues to set up a meeting and get your questions answered?
So as far as I am informed about the driver's ed, as far as that has gone, is having staff members who have gotten a local driving school to agree to work with us. The funding aspect is where we're at a standstill right now. I don't know what action has been taken, if any, towards advocating for that, other than us bringing it up right now.
Well, is there something that, I don't know which administration it may fall under, to look into the scheduling of drivers ed? Because I know my children had that issue where there wasn't enough space. So what do we need to do to accommodate more students into driver's ed, as well as open it up to LAC students, which don't have the opportunity at this point? Yeah, so it's tag team now. Who's going to look into it?
Is there a sense of how much demand there is? Like how many students would want to join, you know, who aren't able to join right now? Because that might help guide the conversation if it goes to the next level of.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, pass those.
Yeah, so we had a school meeting about the issue, and we did a straw poll asking people if they'd be interested in this, and it was like all three of us were in different rooms, so there was kind of 3 meetings going on at the time. But we had, in my room that I was in, we had 45 people say that they would like a driver's ed program, and 0 people say that they wouldn't like one.
Yeah, I believe my room numbers are somewhat irrelevant, given that it was almost entirely middle schoolers in my room, but they said eventually they would be interested, if that holds any weight.
To jump in there, my room, we didn't count numbers, but my estimate from looking at it was around 90% of the room said they would be interested, and the other people just did not. They abstained.
Thank you. Anybody else?
I have a
Oh, go ahead.
I have a question about the algebraic math. Can you explain that a little bit more to us, what you were trying to relay?
Yeah, of course. So so when I was in middle school, going into middle school, there, or at least in 6th and 7th grade, there are kind of 2 options of math you can do. There's an accelerated course, and there's like the standard course. And basically, if you are put into the accelerated course, then if you're in the accelerated course, then eventually that will lead up to taking Algebra 1 in 8th grade. And if you continue taking a math class every year, eventually that would culminate with calculus, AP Calculus BC in senior year, or just a calculus course in senior year. So I believe that the change that has been made, and I could be wrong on this, I was in middle school a while ago, is that the accelerated courses are no longer present, and there is now still the Algebra 1 course in 8th grade so that students can eventually take Calculus BC or a calculus course in senior year. But it's now, there's no longer the accelerated courses in 6th and 7th grade. It's accompanied by a companion course in 8th grade. And I think some of the reasoning behind this, at least I believe I've like talked to a few people about this in the past, is that teachers were making the decisions about who is going to go into an accelerated course going into 6th grade, which I think there were numerous issues present with that. So I was wondering if there's a way to bring back the accelerated courses for 6th and 7th grade, but maybe implement them in a way that's more fair to students, just so that if a student does want to go into more advanced math classes, they can build foundations in 6th and 7th grade. Because obviously, math is not for everyone. But for students who do want to go into Algebra 1 and then eventually into Calculus BC, or Calculus AB, which a lot of students do, I think having that solid foundation in 6th and 7th grade is actually really important for excelling later in high school and in middle school.
Another thing that I would like to add is that being able to take AP Calculus AB or BC is generally considered very important for colleges. It's considered very important in preparing us, or for some cases, if you take one of these courses, you can not take a calc course in college, which I think can be very beneficial because it can be part of distribution requirements. And if you would like to kind of branch out and not do that, and I just think that calc is really, really important because stuff like derivatives, it's very prevalent in just financial decisions and those, STEM fields and all of that. Thanks.
I'm just going to speak to this briefly, because the change to middle school math was definitely led by math teachers at both the high school and the middle school. And it was a lengthy process, research-based. It undergoes regular review. So there's a lot of information about what led to the change that I'm sure there are people who in admin would be happy to share with you, and that you could share with other students who might be raising the same issue. Yes.
What I say is, of course, not meant to insinuate that I know more about how to run a math class than math teachers, or that I know more about how to run a school district or a school than administrators. I'm not trying to say that. But what I will say, and I suppose this is a conversation we could engage other administrators on, I have siblings in the middle schools, so this is not just a me issue. I escaped with my tail singed, is how I think I like to put it. This isn't a conversation or a topic that I think, to be quite frank, people often want to discuss, because they view high achievers in many ways as elitists, and they think that by establishing a kind of hierarchical system that we're separating students in unfair ways. Now, I'm not insinuating that equity is not important, but what I am saying is that one thing I have seen throughout my middle and high school career is that very often administration will do things that will seem to promote equity for students, but in reality might not actually help a large proportion of us. And I'm not trying to tell you that your policies are bad or something like that. I'm really not. But what I'm just trying to say is that when I watch my 7th grade brother and my 9th grade sister have to struggle through this process of taking extra math courses during summer, or doubling up on math in their 8th grade year just so they can take algebra, so they can end up taking AP calculus, because they are high achieving, intelligent students who want to succeed in this world, it makes me a little bit uncomfortable.
Thank you. This is the kind of conversation we've had in depth in various forums for years, and the conversation continues. And so it may be time for there to be a presentation, maybe at the curriculum committee, to get an update on what has been happening over these years and what assessments and evaluation tools are in place and what they're showing us. Okay, anything else? Yeah.
I should just a quick question. So in terms of administrators, who should I reach out to kind of to learn more about this?
I believe Deputy Superintendent Talcott would be the appropriate person to reach out to. And I'll just say one thing about the recycling, keep working on it. I did a tour of several of the buildings where our construction manager for our capital project took us around to show us some of the things that were happening in various buildings. And I noticed in the Boynton cafeteria, they had very extensive signage, very detailed and they had multiple bins and the signs were very clear about what went where. I don't know whether it's working, but those who are working actively on trying to improve recycling in the high school might reach out to folks at Boynton and find out what's happening there.
Or LACS.
Or LACS.
Can I just say real quick, you guys, just to allay some maybe discomfort, just know that this conversation about middle school math is ongoing. And if we keep these conversations open and keep learning from each other, there's a lot of documentation as to why the changes were made that I think you could explore. I mean, personally, I have a sixth grader and an eighth grader right now. And I've been really encouraged by the documentation of why the decisions were made, and also this willingness to keep talking about it and see how things are going and tweak, and then help these students who do maybe have to take summer companion courses, concurrent companion courses in eighth grade, feel and actually achieve success in them. So I have been encouraged by, a lot of conscientious minds are trying to lean into this. And believe me, I'm an advocate for Calculus BC. It's cool. It's great. I was there, so I hear you.
Yeah, and I think just to add, I think that we're gonna, plan on having some conversations like this at the curriculum committee meeting. Lily and I were just talking today, sort of about that and coming up with ways, talking about making sure that we're supporting an anti-racist curriculum, that has diversity, equity, and inclusion at the heart of it. And at the same time, and not in competition with, also figuring out how to have, the highest academic achievement and course rigor. And we're sort of talking about those not being on two ends of a continuum, and it could be 100% of each. So I think we're going to try to have more of those conversations in curriculum and as a board, maybe.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay. Next item is we are on to the consent agenda. I will entertain motions.
I move for approval, all consent agenda items listed in consent agenda, consideration of accounts, personnel reports, students, and minutes of previous meeting as presented.
Second.
Thank you. Questions or comments? Is there anything on the consent agenda that anybody needs to speak to? I don't really see much that's unusual.
I just had one quick question, just in reference to the contract referenced in, just one second. Never mind. I don't have a question about the consent agenda.
All right. All in favor? Okay. And that leads us to Dr. Brown.
Thank you for your leadership this evening, Ms. Lang, and this opportunity to share. And in honor of Professor Bradwell, who's not here, I wish to share how I feel like I'm a part of a time loop this evening. And I do hope to get to some of the questions that were raised tonight because we've been here before. So I'll share some information, but also open to an ongoing dialogue related to some things. you shared and asked about. And most importantly, just to highlight and underscore, it's been in the media today, as of December 1st, all of our young people will have access to free, healthy lunches and breakfast meals. That is pretty cool. And that's unprecedented for this school community. While we've had individual schools who've had that opportunity to access those federal funds in the past, now we have an entire district. And that is noteworthy. So this is a special shout out to the folks who are listening, wondering, what am I talking about? For young people, no more lunch accounts. All right, y'all feel me? You won't be worrying about your account being in the arrears as of December 1st. If there's additional monies on your accounts, if I'm not mistaken, we will get those monies back to you. This is big time, all right? Particularly for parents who were struggling to keep up with putting money on those accounts. And this will help us to expand our approaches to healthy meals. Now, also, because the question that's come to me most often, it came to me from a radio host this morning. This program is not extended to the adults, all right? This is right now just for young people. I'm like Dr. Bryan, we're talking about young people right now, and we can talk about what we'll do for adults at another time. But anyway, I want to make sure folks heard that from me this evening, because that's a special announcement. And if I could, maybe a lightning round to get to some of these questions that were raised, and again, open it up for future conversations and give us some time to bring folks together. My understanding that young people can go back into the lunch line and get additional food. The salad bar is open with a lot of fruits and vegetables there as well. So we will have some additional conversations with our folks to make sure that our policy is being implemented to fidelity in the ways in which we hope. But you should be able to go back and get more food, all right? If anyone is asking for that question. If not, send Dr. Bryman, Ms. Verbo, or myself a note, and we can follow up with some folks. Driver's education, now I know I'm getting old, because I've been a part of this conversation on 3 different occasions. And it was one of the first board meetings it's interesting, coming from Virginia, there was driver's ed programs and they were well funded, and everyone expected to have the privilege of taking driver's ed in a school. That was not always the case here in Central New York, in Ithaca City School District. And we spent a significant amount of early portion of my tenure trying to convince our community to have a program like driver's ed as part of our academic program. Why do we have to convince folks? Because it will be an elective, or it will take away from other academic offerings. I mean, it is a class period. So folks, at the time of 8-period day, when would I fit it in? And if it's offered, well, if my kid takes it, what will they not be taking? And then it came to resources and staffing. And we had to work hard at this table to get the resources in place to provide a staff member to provide driver's education. And we can't forget about the car. Remember, Ms. Ripper, remember when we had to buy a car and how hard it was to buy a car to do driver's ed? Oh my gosh. Anyway, so to expand this program, I am open to it, because I think every young person should have access to driver's education. I do believe that. But let's have a conversation here about the staffing that it would take and the other resources, including a car, and the insurance and all that stuff. So it's a complex conversation that I'm open to, and to hear that you want it, thank you, because that is a culture shift. Yes.
Question about that.
Yeah.
And Karen brought up the idea of scheduling. And back many decades ago now, when I was in high school, there was a driver's education program during the school day, but many of us took it during the summer. And it was an extensive summer offering.
That's a possibility for us as well. Again, staffing is going to be key.
Right.
And then the certification, as someone who was a certified driver's ed teacher, there's a certification. When you put that little brake on the passenger side and a young person there, all heck can break loose, if y'all feel it. So we got to make sure we're ready for that liability and the certifications, and having someone be voluntold to do so. Anyway, I'm open to the conversation.
Just a quick question.
Yes.
Response. I guess somebody mentioned perhaps partnering with one of the existing businesses that do it. What is your, just as far as
Oh
like, what
boy,
you know about-
this reminds me of my Head Start conversations. We would be a competitor to local businesses. I'll stop there. So typically when there are competitors knocking on your door, particularly one as big as us with a $150 million budget, people don't always open the door. Maybe I said too much. This mic. Fire code. I wish Deb is still here. Blame me for fire code stuff, all right? I'm the one who gets the nasty call from the district superintendent or the folks in state ed. I've been looking for fire code language and laws since I was a first day kindergarten teacher, when I hung up the cool stuff from the ceiling and it was hanging there. Y'all feel me? And I was told that's a fire code valve. I asked, where is it? Show me, because I'm gonna keep it up there. And I didn't care what the administrator said. And frankly, I challenged them. I'm here to tell y'all what happens. People call me when they're fire code. There are people who come down and do fire inspections. It's a third-party fire inspector for our region. And they go into schools, not just here, but across our region. They have a little secret book somewhere. I have not asked to look for it. I just trust them. Because what I do know is that the folks in State Ed will call me and will threaten to take away our building occupancy certificate. And we've come close on several occasions because we like to push, we like to delay. So please hear me. If you're feeling the heat and the pressure, yes, there are rules and there is language someplace. I can find it for you if you really want to. But I've pushed it for our inspectors and I've pushed our administrators. We need to comply here or we will lose our building occupancy certificates and no one will be able to come. And I do know of other superintendents who've had to deal with this issue, and there are weeks before young people and adults can get back into the building because for some reason, all of a sudden the requests go into a queue. Y'all feel me? Let's not play this game. When the fire code violations come and they ask us to do these things, we got to do it, or we can be facing other significant problems. And now that you've asked, I will now try to find that private little secret book that I've wondered about for the last 30 years and put it in front of you, all right? And finally, algebra, math, or another time loop conversation. I'm looking forward to our review and ongoing conversations here. It's been one that we've all spent a lot of time discussing. But I want to clarify, because I heard something that I want to make sure I push against. What we do with our mathematics program is as much for the elite students and the best mathematics students in our school district in the country as for anyone else. So let's be clear about not saying that what we did with mathematics a few years ago was to promote equity or for those who have been marginalized by our program. Having looked at the research, talked to the folks at the National Council for Mathematics Teachers and our own educators, what we've done with mathematics to increase the understanding, conceptual understanding of mathematics and the ways in which we've done it benefits the elite and exceptional students as much as anybody else. So as we talk about this, let's talk about how we're doing it for everyone. And it's not an equity initiative. It supports our equity approaches, but it's for mathematics instruction and achievement and a deep understanding of mathematical concepts. That's why we did it. And frankly, that's the only way we were able to survive such a significant shift here, because it benefits everybody. Time loops, I love them. Thank you all for this opportunity to share.
Thank you. Okay, now I think we're going to have some discussion about our efforts, continuing efforts to electrify our bus fleet. We've got a presentation. Who's coming back? Chris? Anybody else?
Thank you for the microphone. Thank you, Tricia. I'm gonna wander around if that's okay. Thank you for the opportunity to talk about capital projects, electric buses, and capital project referendum. So I'll be going through kind of three main topics in this conversation. One is a very brief overview of the capital improvement process for those of you who may have not been through it before. Then we'll talk about electrification of the bus fleet, and that will lead us to a decision point around an upcoming referendum vote.
And Chris, everybody wants to introduce yourself.
Oh, yes. Thank you, Laura. My name is Christopher Glaubitz. I'm a senior project manager at Tetra Tech Architects and Engineers. We have been delighted to have been helping the district since I think 2018 and helping the district prepare for the 2019 referendum and doing the $120 million worth or so of capital projects since then. So we are very excited to continue that conversation. Okay, I'm going to go through this, and I think it doesn't advance on your slides, so I'm going to be kind of looking up here, and I'll try to describe, so if you want to follow along. So ICSD has a portfolio of buildings. You own and operate a little more than 1.1 million square feet and about 260 some acres worth of property, right? So as we think about capital project improvements, we survey all that stuff, and we have a process. I'm not going to get into it in too much detail here, but generally we plan a project and then it goes into the design process. Sometimes those overlap when there's comfort that the public vote that you see in that green bar, that there's a lot of confidence in that. And so sometimes we start design before that so that we can get things done in as quick a time frame as we can. We do design. We do have to submit to the New York State Education Department for approval. They are the folks that give you those building permits and those certificates of occupancy that Dr. Brown was talking about earlier. So we do have to get their approval. And then we go into construction. So for generally for projects that public school districts in New York State need to complete, they have to bid them publicly. So there are some rules around how that needs to happen. Okay. And feel free, if you have questions or comments, feel free. I'll be trying to look around and see if anybody wants to jump in with anything. This graphic on the right talks about some of the ways that information is gathered and processed, basically. There are Google Forms, there's Let's Talk, there are meetings like this one where we get input from the community. That typically is vetted through executive team members and an administrative group. We have the OACM meeting, that's owner, architect, construction manager. Those are the three entities that really make capital projects happen. Those happen on a monthly basis. A lot of decisions are made in those meetings at a kind of nitty-gritty level. But also, we take some direction from the folks that are at those meetings as to what direction we're going to move in and what studies we want to do and what additional work we want to look into. Obviously, we have facility committee meetings like the Board of Education here. And obviously the voters do input on some of the things, and we've seen some recent input from the voters on some e-bus items. So what is not on this, you can see on the left-hand side, many of the groups that we talk to as we're planning projects and designing them. What you don't see here is the state of New York, which does have some requirements as well. Among them, EV buses. So this is a little bit of a background around the efforts that Ithaca City School District has been undertaking over the last couple years to prepare for and start to implement the conversion to electric buses that has been mandated by the state of New York. Started back in 2020 when the picture on the right was part of that last project referendum, and in the first phase of that, added paving and did some improvements to your bus lot. One of the things we did at the time, a couple of the previous board members said, there's hearing this thing about like electric buses. I don't know if it's going to happen. I don't know what's going on with it, but while we're digging this place up, let's just put some conduits in and maybe that'll help us in the future. Well, it is helping us right now. And we'll talk a little bit about why that's helping, that spare conduit. In 2022, the mandate came out. We started planning some capital project efforts to support the procurement of electric buses. November, there was an electric bus that came, and maybe some of you saw it. They had the frunk open, and it took a little drive around to understand, a little bit more about the buses and how they work. This calendar year, the district solicited and received fleet analysis, which is one of the very first really important steps in assessing your current bus routes, current bus technology, and modeling out on a really detailed level what that means for implementing buses. That was done by another party, Polera. Then, of course, there was the budget, but the budget vote Proposition 2, which was overwhelmingly supported by the community to procure electric buses. Then we continued it on with capital project work, submitting to NICEAG for the service request. That's your electrical utility. 4 chargers were installed this past summer, so down out at the bus garage. Then you've had e-buses delivered. You have 5 currently in your fleet. In last month, we opened bids for the next group of 4 chargers. So pretty soon you'll have 8 chargers at your central bus depot. There is also a charger at Caroline Elementary School and at Enfield Elementary School that have recently been installed, and we're getting those online right now. We have also just started design on what we're calling stage 2. You'll see a little bit more detail about that in a moment, which is the project that will bring sort of the full electrical service in to electrify your whole fleet and get that infrastructure in there. So this is an early idea about how we were going to stage this project in the early days, as we were trying basically to figure out you're getting e-buses. When are you getting these e-buses? Okay, let's get some chargers going quickly. So we had to get creative with finding some power on a quick basis. Recently, there was a presentation to the superintendents across the state of New York at the recent conference. Our very own Amanda Verba was among the panelists to talk about experience that districts have had. And also we had the director of facilities planning, Sarah Madison, in attendance as well, presenting there, as well as Vincent Rashika from NYSERDA. So some state level folks who are tasked with actually implementing this, weighing in on how that's going. Some of you recognize Liz Fox as well, former transportation director, who really did a lot of great work to get this initiative going and do the first steps that Mr. Van Kuren here is continuing on. So I want to spend just a minute on this graphic. It's a lot of lines and things, but we developed this, and my colleague Ed Bernhauer here, this is the moment to introduce Ed. He's helping me with this. He helped get this graphic together. I want to start in 2026. There's that blue bar that is the EPA round 2 bus procurement timeline. And at the right-hand side of that, there's like a dashy line kind of pointing down. So the blue line is how many buses you have, electric buses you have, and are anticipated to have. So we wanted to sort of plot that out and say, okay, you've got 5 right now, and assuming you're going to procure a few more at the next May budget vote, okay, probably there's going to be 2 more. We'll assume 2 a year. If you are successful in this EPA grant application, you're going to get 15 buses. So that's why that blue line goes up really steep. And we said, that's a critical point. We need to stay ahead of that. And so we work backwards in time to plan projects, right? So if we know we want to keep that green line, which represents your charging capacity in number of chargers, we want to keep that green line above the blue line. All right, we're as architects and designers, we're visual people. We're like the green line above the blue line, and that helps us keep track of things. So at the top, we have some bars of project duration. And so that pink bar at the top, which says NICEAG service upgrade. So we're dealing with a state agency, which is an electrical utility. And yes, it takes 2 years to get a transformer out on the site. So that's based on the review by that state agency. They're in control of designing, what pole the power comes off, what the transformer is going to be. They own that, will own that transformer. And then downstream from that, the district owns the infrastructure. So they're in control of that process and procurement.
Just to contextualize this,
Yeah.
how many buses total do we have in our fleet?
You have 88 buses currently. Yeah, thanks. And then if you've had to try to attempt to buy an electrical transformer since COVID started, you'll know that it takes like a year to order one of these things or more. So again, backing up, we kind of figured out that we need to start a project, we need to do the things to design and submit to NICEAG to stay on a schedule to set you up for success if you get those 15 buses through that EPA grant. This project, all right, so let's keep going. All right, so just to be clear, currently, the buses that you have are being charged by your existing electrical infrastructure. So on the left there, we have the little building, the amount of power that you have in your building. There's a little bit of excess power, and basically we've done the analysis and we're kind of scavenging all that power through that conduit that we put in a couple years ago to charge those first 8 buses, and that sort of bridges you until we can get this larger capital project done in that 2 years to get that transformer on site and all that infrastructure in. So that would be stage 2. So to give you a sense of scale of the electrical service, currently you have a 200 amp, you have 200 amp service. We'll be bringing in a 3,000 amp service. So that, you know, kind of gives you an idea of what your building operates on right now and what we'll be bringing in to charge all your electric buses. And that would be sized for the entire sort of build out of the electric fleet. So this is a little bit of, I think this is an older slide, but this is a preview of a decision that we're going to come back to in a few minutes. This is kind of a preview, and I'll tell you a little bit more about bus garages in a moment. So teeing up to a referendum vote potentially in May, there are a couple options that we'd like to talk about. So I'm going to just kind of go through them very quickly, and we can think about them as I'm talking for a couple more minutes, and we're going to come back to this. One is basically an infrastructure level project, which is what we've started designing and keeping it at that point. That's around a $15 million project. The next option that we'd like to recommend is around that $40 million option. And that would be if you want to do your bus garage, create a new bus garage as well as part of that. And then Amanda Verba and others have consulted with the district's fiscal advisors and done an analysis of debt service and what can be supported, and have determined that it's sort of not to exceed 125 million is something that would continue to be supported as debt service rolls off. I don't know, Amanda, if you want to talk any more about that at this time, but that's a metric that has been vetted. Super. Okay, so that's a decision that let's kind of keep in the back of our minds for a moment. I want to talk a little bit about the bus garage itself as we're thinking about, you know, what sort of capital project improvements make sense to do at this time. So here's a picture of the bus garage. It's no Alhambra. It's a little bit old, not from the 1200s, but the 1960s. And it's been serving you very well for many, many years. At the top, we see that the original site plan included 26 buses, right? So 88 buses now gives you a sense of what your facility was originally designed to support and what it actually is supporting today. And you think like, wow, that's to the credit of the administration and transportation directors and all the folks that have kept this facility performing at the level that it needs to support the district. We, as part of a cycle required by New York State, but also requested by the district in a little more detail than what the state requires, is a facility evaluation. So some of you have seen this document. We go through every building in your district and we write up observations and put numbers to them and do the analysis so that when we're planning a capital project, we have this library of, there's sort of more nuts and bolts items typically that we can go to, and we can attempt to anticipate when things are going to wear out so we can replace them before they do so. So we do have that analysis, of course. There is some of the things that come up on the existing building is there's some older roofing. There are all these original items that are from the 1960s that are still serving you very well, but are aging, let's just say. And we're designed in a time when we didn't have to operate under a lot of the code requirements that we do right now, like accessibility, like fire alarms and things like that. Obviously, you have more staff in that building to operate a much larger department. You don't have bigger offices. So there's some really inherent features of the building that we'd want to improve if we were to attempt to save that building and improve it, which is definitely an option. So this is the scope of what we're currently designing. I'm not going to go through it all, but just to say that the pink is the electrical infrastructure stuff. We got transformers, you got switches, you got all the conduit and about half of the wiring. I'm not going to stick all the wiring in and let it sit for 10 years until you get those last of your e-buses. There are a number of chargers, obviously, to charge the buses. That's part of the capital project. There are a few other facility enhancements, some canopies that would go over the front of the buses that will collect some solar energy to be able to charge the buses. If you've been out to the site, there's a relatively old storage building that's ready for demolition and a couple other things on the scope. This is just a graphic representation if you want to kind of understand on the site where we're proposing things to happen. We did study in a very kind of quick way in terms of just sort of proof of concept. Could a slightly expanded bus garage facility fit on that site? And could we do it in a way so you could build it in one area of the site, keep your existing facility online, and then, and switch over? So we're just really high level trying to see would it even fit? And we think we could do it all on that site. So back to that decision point. So I'm not sure if we want to transition the discussion here, or maybe I can do this slide and then the next slide, which talks about the schedule. So here we are in the middle of November. If you would like to have a vote in May, which is the custom at ICSD, it's not a state requirement, but it is what the community typically has experienced from the district. We have a good month to figure out the scope of work, and we could then start our communication cycle to the community and prepare for a vote in May. Another option could be, if you want to consider a vote at another time of the year, that would give some more time to vet those options and develop the scope of work. That scope of work, if you're considering a larger project, I just want to mention that there, over the last year or more, in OACM meetings and other meetings, there have come up certainly a long list of needs that have been articulated by different departments. Your health and wellness department, right? Many of your nurses are working in spaces that were designed in the 60s and in the 70s and are not accessible and, don't have space to address mental health support, for example. There's always roofing and boilers. There is a lot of communication systems, from fire alarms to clocks and public address systems, which are a safety feature in schools that are really aging out. So we sort of collected the information that we did in the facility evaluation and came up with $8 or $9 million worth of that district-wide. There's paving. I'd like to introduce a colloquial construction term, dead alligatoring. So if you go and it's an evocative term for the pattern that you see in asphalt when it's starting to fail. We see a couple $1 million worth of asphalt paving that could happen at Cayuga Heights Elementary School if you've driven there and tried to avoid those potholes. So there are many just practical nuts and bolts facility items that go that are documented. So if we're considering a larger capital project, I just wanted to speak a little bit to the fact that we're kind of getting ahead of some of those things and organizing thinking around what a capital project would include. We recently met with Northeast Elementary School, a school that has a wonderful enrollment issue, which is we have a lot of kids in this building, right? So how are we going to support them to be able to have all the spaces that they need to deliver the kind of curriculum, the kind of education that the Ithaca can deliver? So I could go on and on. There's a long list of things that we've studied, but just want to convey that $125 million might seem like a lot, but we absolutely have a head start on determining what a scope of work would be. So with that, I think I'll open it up or pass the mic to someone else if you'd like to. Yeah.
Questions, reactions to what you've heard this evening? And maybe, well, while you're thinking, not going back to the slide, because that was not how I would have liked to have seen it represented. I'm thinking more like 3 options, A, B, and C. A, more like $15 million, but we're making some incremental improvements. B, where we are looking at only a transportation facility to accommodate 88 buses when we have a space that was built to accommodate 26. And then C, and I want our community to hear this, C is more about a technical and fiscal conversation as it is about the deferred maintenance that we are faced with each and every day. At that same conference you mentioned earlier, that superintendent conference, I had the privilege of sitting there and having been through a strategic approach by the Board of Education to navigating maintenance issues and needs in a way where we've kept our tax rate, well, our tax rate's gone down, and we've maintained a consistent approach to debt service around 7%. I sit on another board in our community with a large budget where we have not done that. So kudos to this board for being strategic to think about how to use state aid and fiscal advisors to maintain a level set when it comes to our capital project and improvements, and being thoughtful because, hey, as soon as we're finishing one project, we should have already had another one approved because it's a bit of a 10-year cycle. And now having learned how long it takes to get things into the queue, get them approved, it takes about 4 or 5 years. So yes, we should, as a community, be thinking about our next capital project. If we want to have your superintendent sit in a meeting with hundreds of others who have not thought that way, who are freaking out. Because not thinking like the way we are would look like a significant increase into the tax burden. It would look like us not generating revenue on state aid. It would look like us having deferred maintenance where our roofs are leaking and our spaces are antiquated, and we have facilities that were built in the 1960s and have not expanded. So that's my way of saying I love this board and the way you have been thinking about approaching capital projects. And option C would incorporate a new facility and the other maintenance, deferred maintenance issues that we have in our organization. And would, because of great fiscal planning, would keep our approach to budgeting consistent and comparable without a significant tax rate increase. And this is me trying to explain it as a layperson because I've been educated by some of the best in the business. And it would help us continue to generate revenue in the ways in which we've been doing to offset other expenses. So it's just smart financial planning. A, B, and C, not a A, B, C, D, and a D, I think it was. A, B, and C is what I would like to propose, and a recommendation for us to think and consider strongly C, because I think we're at that place. Now that also pushes us, as Chris said it, and I don't know if everybody heard it, we have about a month to think about what this will look like before we'll start our road shows, which we've done in the past around January to help our community understand why and how and what we're thinking about, with hopes that we will put this in front of our community in May. Hope that was, I drug that out as long as I could to give you all a chance to really think about the questions you want to ask. Okay.
I'll just say, those of us who've been doing this long enough, we have seen our neighbors and other school districts in this state have to try to override the tax cap significantly to fix deferred maintenance, override the tax cap significantly to try and catch up with medical and benefit costs. And yeah, I could go on, but to Dr. Brown's point, we have tried very hard to corral the things we can. So in those days where we have to override anything, it's always going to be about teaching and learning. That's the goal, to keep as much money in our budget focused on compensation and teachers and learning. And as we have discussed now in finance for a couple of meetings, our margins are thin. So we have to be frugal and wise.
Given that pretty much all of our buildings are very old, have we ever explored, I know that we do not want to consolidate to one building and we love our community schools, but I wonder, I mean, being in some of these schools every day, if there's ever a plan to kind of shut a school down to completely rebuild, is that, I mean, thinking about Northeast and there's a new development growing and it's already bursting at the seams. I mean, is that something that's ever in the plan?
Yes, we thought, let me be clear, we've thought about this, all right? The last superintendent who said that didn't say we thought about it, just said, yes, we've explored it and it was reported that we were doing it. So I would say we commissioned a study years ago to look at what different configurations will look like in our school community to include the closure of particular buildings. So we have that information, and we even looked at what it would look like to build on newer sites or other sites, i.e. Barclays Flats, and do something with BJ. Like, so we looked at, explored all the, we can dust off the previous study, we can commission a new study. At this time, in no way are we recommending doing anything like that, because that would be, I don't know, the last time every day you look at what it would cost to build new elementary and middle and high school buildings. There's significant costs, particularly at this current, in this current state. So we could explore that. The cost savings we found before were minimal. But that's me quoting a study that was done probably about 8. Were you here when it happened? It was before you. So that would have been 8. Man, I am in time loops today. It would have been almost a decade ago when we did that study. And we found at the time that there were minimal savings if looking to close buildings and open buildings. And we also know the community resistance there would be, because that had happened with the previous administration. We even explored this opportunity.
To follow up on that, because I don't explain myself well sometimes, I'm thinking temporarily shut and move a school to say Northeast, to completely remodel and build up. Have students go elsewhere while that happens to do that. And then there was, the other question was kind of along with that, because it feels like every school is so old that we're going to forever be in this capital project loop forever. Because there's no way to just like catch up with what needs to be done. Or I mean, that's my, yeah.
Yeah, I think even with a new building, you're still going to be in the loop.
Right.
Because you have a brand new roof or a mechanical system, and that buys you some time. But there's always a cycle of, refreshing and bringing things up to code and replacing equipment that wears out.
But the option of shutting a school down temporarily and relocating to build, is that something we've ever considered, or would it be worth it?
We looked at the, what are they, mobile units, trailers, and we'll be using those in the near future. Significant costs associated with that. But that is an option we could explore.
And we've used them in the past. I remember touring the ones at DeWitt, touring the ones at Boynton. We've done that before. We had kids out in these beautiful Western looking trailers while we fix something.
Using them in the future
Yeah.
is part of the plan for our existing capital project to have some, I don't remember details, but have some.
To just be a little more specific about that, the current capital project that is happening at Ithaca High School, this building, to replace a lot of the mechanical equipment, increase the lake source cooling that's coming to this building, will require enough classrooms to be displaced and we talked with Mr. Trumbull and Martha Hardesty and other leaders of Ithaca High School to try to find swing space. And so, yes, we are using temporary classroom facilities as a temporary measure for swing space so that we can get that project done and then get everybody back into the building.
Can I ask Dr. Brown? So you mentioned, can we go back to the slide that has the A, B, C, D, and E? So explain to me a little bit, help me understand how you mentioned in A, B, and C, how it maps onto this or does not, or it expands it, or.
I'm thinking, well, looking at this, I'm thinking B, D, and E. I'm sorry, I may have B, D, and E.
So I guess my question, just because Dr. Bradwell mentioned just some initial thoughts about this. I'm looking at the differences between C and D and seeing the main differences are kind of one that includes larger square footage for maybe projected needs in the future. Is that a correct understanding?
Speak to the Omar.
Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, so the difference is, so in option C, it says match existing square footage. So we said, all right, if you were just to build the same square footage that you would, just so we could sort of compare apples to apples between sort of A, B, C. But then option D in this slide would actually provide a facility that we think has an appropriate square footage for the operations that happen out of that building, and also incorporate your grounds department into that, which makes a lot of sense. Currently, it's situated right next to your athletic field. And so in a lot of these meetings that I talked about before, one of the things that comes up relatively frequently is having storage out by your facilities, by your athletic facilities. So in discussion, we determined, oh, it could be a good idea to be able to turn over that existing structure to a use that its location would rise to, and take that department and integrate it back in with transportation and some of the other functions that are happening at a different site already. You're already driving your mowers around. You're already maintaining. They got to drive it over the bus garage to do maintenance, right? So let's just put it there. So that was kind of the thinking around those two options.
The expanded square footage. So the
Yeah.
expanded square footage is, for the most part, responding to current needs as opposed to forecasting future needs. I'm seeing nods.
Kind of both, yeah.
Okay.
Providing a bus garage for your current needs, absolutely. Adding grounds into that as well to improve your ability to,
Okay.
To have an athletic complex that's just more, gives you more amenities.
Okay. Okay, so follow-up question, maybe this is a conversation for another meeting, but I'm curious as to how anticipating future needs is done. Are we looking at population projections? Are we looking at, I guess what we've learned about how physical facilities use has shifted, in the last 3 or 4 years? You think of like the entire retail space and corporate facilities are experiencing less of a need. That's not directly translatable to education, but I'm just curious as to how the forecasting process goes. Like, how do you tell the future and what will be building wise?
Good question.
Yeah.
During the design process, we absolutely look at the existing, and we interview folks. We talk with everybody in the district who, needs to be a part of that. And we do try to anticipate, oh, we see this thing coming down the road. We know we're going to need another administrator for that. Let's either build in a space that is flexible, maybe like a large meeting room that could be subdivided, or let's just throw another office in or whatever. So yeah, we definitely have those conversations as we're designing. And yeah, it's crystal ball. What's that balance between trying to anticipate a future need and, maintaining the right sizing for a building or for a system. So those are in, in contrast sometimes. Yeah, thank you.
But in this situation, it's New York State mandate somewhat, or that by 2035, we have to have electric vehicles replaced. So that's one thing that should always pop up in each of these slides to remind us and remind the public what the mandate is. I was quite surprised to see an option E added, because at the facilities committee last time, we only had 4. But I'm in agreement with if we could consolidate to 3 options, especially if we're presenting to the public and the community, to narrow it down.
Absolutely. I apologize. The slide wasn't updated as we had discussed. But yeah, that is absolutely
32 and 40 million is negligible in terms of debt service. I was just saying the difference between 32 and 40 million is negligible in terms of debt service that we would have to pay.
I have a few thoughts I'm going to share at this point. I've been in a lot of these meetings, not all of them, but a lot of them. And I think given the 4th or 5th time around here, I'm getting it. And I see a lot of the arguments. I understand replacement schedules and things deteriorating out over time. I would see the whole big various needs identified, or the pig in a poke option, as I would call option C as it's currently presented here, as something that we would be looking at perhaps for the next capital project. If we're focused on electric vehicles, if we're focused on our transportation infrastructure, I think we should be looking at that. I don't think we should be trying to pull in everything else that we might want in the district or might need in the district simply because it's a capital project and we have a lot of very generous taxpayers. We also have a lot of very upset people who have paid their tax bills recently, their school tax bills recently. And 125 million as opposed to 40 million is a huge leap when we're not seeing itemized arguments for what we're talking about. We're talking about contracts being renegotiated next year. There's no way I could support option C at this point. Frankly, option B is a stretch for me. But I've spent enough time looking around the bus garage that I agree that it does need to be replaced and it needs to be brought up to speed. But to go beyond that without a whole lot more information about exactly what we'd be getting for that money, even though it's capital project money and it gets funded differently and we want to keep spending so that we don't fall behind, I get it. But there's no way I could support option C at this point.
And Jill, to be clear, you're looking at option C on your computer or on this slide as it is up here?
I'm looking at, as Eldred said, between 32 and 40. It's kind of a
But you're
wash.
not as much comfortable with the 125 million that's unitemized as far as
Exactly.
its allocation?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think replacing the bus garage, I think obviously the e-bus infrastructure and the bus wash have all been well documented and make a lot of sense.
Yeah, I just asked because there are different versions of the slides.
Yeah.
And sometimes different numbers are associated with different.
Thanks for that clarification, Katie. Yeah, I'll, if I could just point out that in the 2019 referendum, the strategy was to flesh out the first couple phases in more detail and allow the rest of that to be responsive to the needs that come up during the district cycle, the educational advancements. Because if we were to try to figure out what's going to happen, to Katie's point earlier, 10 years down the road, do we know what pedagogical improvements we want to make in our district? So I think there was a lot of discussion last time around it, and I think intention around defining what we can in the next few cycles, and then allowing the rest of that referendum amount to be responsive. I don't know if anybody else who went through that has an opinion about it as a strategy.
Yes, and I do have something that we would have been thinking about. What phase are we in now? 4, 5? 4 or 5, and we're looking at building entrances, and we're looking at some things that our community has expected. We would have been going out for approval in the midst of a pandemic had we not done that approval in 2018. So no one can predict the future. What we can speak to is how we are managing finances and keeping a consistent approach to what we're asking our taxpayers for. Again, and we can have this conversation each and every year and go back to our taxpayers with very detailed proposals. And we could be doing that in the midst of something we can't foresee. So I get the risk, but also there is a strategy associated with it. That's why I was asking.
Yeah, I'm going to guess that you've looked at this, but just in due diligence, I want to ask if we're thinking about constructing a new building, have we looked at and dismissed the possibility that it be somewhere else? I mean, because we're doubling down on a location that was chosen in the 1967, things have changed. And I also just wondering, it's a very big district, so I understand the benefits of centralization, but also having buses distributed throughout the district so they're closer to where they need to go. Have we looked at it?
Yes, we have.
Okay.
I'll say the D word, which is Danby at this point, which is always something that comes up as a site which has unlike many of your sites that are centrally located within your district, does have some acreage that one could conceive of building a new facility, but it's way out there, right? So one of the things that we're going to start studying that we've talked about at OACM meetings and other items is studying your district, looking one at your electrical infrastructure building by building, and looking at your sites from like a site planning perspective to look at whether it does make sense to do like satellite charging facilities, for example. That was the context that we thought it might be more relevant to study and see, does it make sense to, you know, charge a certain number of buses somewhere more far flung from the center and bring them back to the depot for servicing and that sort of thing, which is why we do have a charger at Caroline and one at Enfield, because those are kind of out there, and we can use that charging in that location to help the electric buses get around and do what they need to do.
So to Garrick's point, actually, one last question. With the FEMA floodplains updated and much more substantial around Ithaca, do we know how that might impact ICSD properties and anything we need to do to prevent damage?
We are required when we submit capital projects to look at those FEMA flood maps, and we've done that for this campus. And there are actually different zones just across this campus. I'm not aware that the bus garage facility is in a zone that is impacted, or frankly, any of your other buildings. Yeah, so that is something that we do have to look at.
Next step.
Tonight. No votes tonight, all right? Tonight was informational. Yeah.
So Thursday, we have Facilities Committee at 5 o'clock, and then that immediately is followed by Finance Committee. And what both committees have agreed to is doing an overlap. Starting at 6:15, we will actually have fiscal advisors come and present to us. And so that's Ben Maslona will be the representative, and he's the person who really is kind of the studier of our debt service, of interest rates, right? What we can afford for premium interest, the way state aid rolls in as a revenue source. And he's mapped that out, and he's going to explain much better than I ever could, right? How that debt service financing works, regardless of the threshold of millions of dollars that you choose, right? Because the reality is, whenever we get voter approval, that's not when sort of the timing starts. It's when we first secure our debt, and debt can be secured even for a very large project in portions. We would never go out for the full 100 million. We're not doing that now, right? You only are allowed to secure debt for what the construction is that is approved at the state aid office in New York State Education Department. And so the reason why we want to give you those three options, and again, my apologies for that slide being the wrong slide. There was a 3-option slide that we were hoping to utilize. Any one of the options that you choose, it's really about the timing, not about the total amount, right? It's about the timing that we would design, submit to state ed, get approval from state ed, go and bid that work, whether we accept that bid for that work or not, right? Because if it's off budget, we go back out. And then we secure the financing. That could be through government entities like DASNY, which is what we're using right now, the Dormitory Authority, or through more traditional where banks would bid on those bands or bonds, right? Bands are shorter term, they're 5 years. Bonds are long term. We've utilized both depending on the market factors. So that'll be the next step first and foremost, because we have to build an understanding of confidence of what we would all then go to the voters for, right? And then we also have to build the language and the definitions of the terms to be able to explain it when people are asking us questions. and also at facilities, we'll be constantly looking at this. One thing that I don't know if it was mentioned, I do really want to be very clear, that electrical load that you're talking about, we cannot do that without also thinking about solar, because that is not a good pathway for us to just put everything onto the grid. We actually have to think about mechanisms to support that grid by utilizing solar. And the plan right now is every one of those at the bus garage is thinking about our spaces that are parking lots, asphalt spaces, where we have those canopies of solar that would feed into that grid. So then that way we can also support the energy in that as well. So I think that was one thing that I really just wanted to also support, because it sounds like we're taking a lot from the system, but we actually really are also trying to think about ways for environmental sustainability.
I'll just add, Amanda, in the very low interest world that we have been living in for a while, we took some calculated risks, right, in those bands and bonds, and did well by our taxpayers, and saved close to $10 million on that first $100 million bond, of which we then invested in. Thank God we invested that in internet and Wi-Fi infrastructure, was served us well when the sugar honey iced tea hit the fan. In this new interest environment, I will say I'm out of my depth and trying to figure out, how to roll. So I'm very interested in what they're going to tell us. This is a whole new world.
Thank y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
And I just want to say this is a discussion of the Haudenosaunee flag resolution, or the proposed action regarding the Haudenosaunee flag. And we had a presentation at our last full board meeting. We had some time for response, but we really didn't have time for generating a lot of questions, and there are questions. And also the fact is Sean has very much taken the lead on this, and he's not here. So the notion is that we will have some discussion of what we understand is being proposed and what questions we have about what is being proposed, and then we will go from there to try to answer questions. Nail down a proposal that we would eventually vote. So I'm opening the floor for discussion.
So as I am quickly fading here, still recovering from a very bad flu, let me just say this, and I'm going to step away and get some rest. I had chances in the past. I have mentioned, or other people have mentioned, that although we want to do right by the Six Nations, there is some conflict within one of those nations, the Cayuga Nation. And the conflict is between those who support the traditional leadership, who has been in a relationship with the Bureau of Indian Affairs for decades, and a more traditional style of leadership. I spoke to the leader, the consent leader of the more traditional side, and he derives his power from a group of elder women. And based on the conversations that we had today, and I took the responsibility because Sean was unavailable, we need to slow down just a bit until we hear from him. There's some very specific things about the height of the flag. Apparently they're supposed to be equal, about the need for it to be in its own pole. And there were some things I just was not clear on that he was telling me that maybe Sean has had discussions with Kate about. But as I suspected, they want to talk to us to make sure we're doing this in the most appropriate way that satisfies the young people, but also doesn't disturb their expectations for their tradition.
They being who in this case? They want to talk to us.
They is the individual who's representing the more traditional elements of that tribe, as opposed to the side who gets the publicity is a side, again, under the auspices of the Bureau of Indian Affairs. So apparently for the Cayugas, that is not the only player. As we've seen some of the incidents take place up in the Seneca area, there's contention between groups. And the group who claims to be representing the Queen Mothers, as they're called, their representative wants to have more communication with us about how we represent that flag. And I told them I'm not against it. Sean's not against it. They've apparently been in discussions before. So I invited him to come talk to all of us so we're all on the same page.
Well, I mean, one thing that was mentioned that during the presentation, I think, but it certainly is something that I read about. It's my understanding that it seemed like the proposal was, because Ithaca High School has 2 flagpoles, the proposal would be to fly the Haudenosaunee flag on a second flagpole. And there are, I believe there are federal regulations about the position of any other flag, a different flagpole in relation to the US flag on its flagpole. So we would have to be clear about that. And then if part of an idea is that we would add flagpoles at all of our buildings to be able to fly flag on a separate flagpole, we need to have some understanding of the cost of that and the logistics of that. Is there space? How would it happen? How soon could it happen? All of it.
Yeah, we're wading into some details here that we need to learn more about. Apparently, from the nation's perspective, all indigenous nations, they really blanch at the idea of having their flag underneath an American flag, whether or not it's on a separate pole, because the treaties say they're sovereign nations. So these are the kind of things that I don't want to set Dr. Brown up. I want to set us up to be in the middle of some things here. So the more we learn, the better off we'll be.
Would there be any interest in sidestepping the flag issue for now and moving forward quickly on some sort of large plaque or explanatory thing, obelisk, whatever, that would say, you know, we're on the land that was traditionally used by Cayuga Nation or whoever else in the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. I just think there's information that's good information from our educational facility that maybe we, you know, look at putting up something that explains the history and why it's important to acknowledge previous inhabitants.
Like a long form permanent land acknowledgement.
That's what I'm wondering.
Just one of my reactions to that is that I found the presentation very educational. And what really hit me was the way that the presenters explained the significance of a flag and particularly this flag, the meaning it has. It represents sovereignty over the land. That's what flag is. And this particular flag represents peace and how six nations eventually came together and pledged peace, and the flag was designed to represent their pledge of peace. So, you know, that's just something that the presentation really hit that home for me. But I think, you know, if there are more discussion to be.
Yes, because I want us to be careful not to insult individuals who came here with a request and not to, we're not trying to sidestep in any which way. So we just have to get more information about the flag, the position, and as Eldred had just educated us on too.
So just so, you know, somebody, some of the paid staff
Yeah.
could get some information about what schools have how many flagpoles.
Yeah, we've
And
ca-
what other flags are being flown at any of them.
Yeah, we've captured the questions that were raised. We will gather some additional information. We most likely will be connecting with the young people who presented to hear their perspectives. And thank you, Jill, for that recommendation. There may be an opportunity for both and or an either or, but again, that's something I had not previously thought about, which could be something that they would want us to do in addition to, or instead of. We'll see. But we have the questions. We will bring more information back to you. As I'm understanding, this item is tabled, correct? Do you have to vote to table it?
No, I mean, it's listed as an action item. I mean, as a discussion item.
Got it.
So, we discussed. So I don't think it needs to be taken. Further discussion. And then, item 11.3, the social media class action lawsuit, and so you're gonna give us a little information about that. Somebody.
Well, the memo was in board docs, correct? We provided a memo with
Yeah.
background information, and Ms. Talk and I are looking at each other because neither one of us like to speak for attorneys. That was carefully crafted by our attorneys as far as the background information. I am open to engaging in discussion and thoughts about it, but I want to make sure folks understand technically what's happening.
Do we want to, do people have questions that we wanted to take note of, and then we can come back to our attorney?
That and, yeah, if there's discussion, folks' initial reactions to a class action lawsuit against a social media company by a school district. I have strong feelings about it, but I would love to hear others' thoughts around that topic as well.
I think this is just the beginning. I think this is going to be like big tobacco, and we're going to see that they have information about how dangerous this is. And we're just at the tip of the iceberg. I would like to actually, I don't know what to make of this particular document and us joining it. I'd like to hear my colleagues' opinions, but I think there's going to be more of this, a lot more.
Where is this?
It's in board docs under the social media.
Yeah, because I was.
For anyone that's viewing or will view later, can someone summarize what the lawyer said? I am not that person, but
Maybe it's in front of me. I have some professional experience in summarizing. Basically, that hundreds of lawsuits have recently been filed on behalf of school districts across the country against various social media entities, and in short, the lawsuits claim that they have sought to maximize profits by targeting youth, and that in effect they have become what's called yes, a public nuisance, yes. The lawsuits seek injunctive relief, requesting that current practices of companies be halted or modified. And lastly, the lawsuits request financial compensation to each affected school district. So each school district that signs on. The law firm that represents us was approached by another law firm, and they are joining with the Friends group on a contingency fee basis, which means none of the school district parties would be fronting any money if they join this lawsuit, that the attorneys would only be paid if they're successful in obtaining a judgment, a financial judgment. So it's similar to what was recently settled with Jewel Lab regarding vaping products. So our law firm has entered into a co-counsel agreement with this California firm, and they are asking us, do we want to get on board? I think that's an adequate summary.
That's good, yeah. Thank you.
We have a student question.
Oh, yeah.
Hi, first of all, as somebody who admittedly does get a little too consumed by TikTok, I think that this is a pretty good idea. So let me just start with that. I do have some questions in terms of the financial compensation and just policies in general. So obviously, well, obviously or not obviously, there like the financial compensation to me seems like the smaller issue. I'm a little more concerned about what we as a district, like if we win the lawsuit or just moving forward, what are our social media policies and regulations envisioning to be, and just how well you, Dr. Brown, and the board feels that this lawsuit would impact or not impact our policies moving forward, and what are those plans? Thank you.
Always depend on young people to ask me the toughest questions and the ones that I don't want to answer publicly. Because as Professor Bradwell said, as we plan for this agenda, what I share now is probably going to get picked up nationally, and I will be trolled. As I read this memo and I think about this lawsuit, if we remove the word social and just leave the word media, I think we are at the tip of what is going to be big. And when I think about what was written here about excessive use, causing anxiety, depression, and other mental health issues, there are a number of media outlets that are contributing to that. Heck, if my children Google my name because of the media, they will see things that will cause all of those things. So I would suggest, in lieu of going after $8,000, which is probably what we would get, or a little bit more as a result of such a suit, along with hundreds of others, is to double down on our efforts to educate young people about critical thinking and empathy and humanity, because that is what we are in the business of doing. And I would much rather have our efforts focused on how do you consume misinformation and media in a way where you're thoughtful, empathetic, and using it to further humanity, and not go after what is something that we don't even know how deep it will go. We don't know the research associated with it. And hey, if we're going to sue TikTok and Twitter, let's think about some other media sources that have put out misinformation that folks are looking at all day, using to harm, using to dehumanize, using to hurt children. So that's my thinking on it, and I hope that's printed, because I'm not in favor of this distraction. I'm in favor of us educating about critical thinking and how to use information to construct love and loving environments, not to destroy.
Yeah, I agree that definitely education about misinformation is like really important, especially considering the environment in which we live, in which misinformation is really prevalent. And I also agree with Lucine, as somebody who has spent time on social media platforms. There are really insidious tricks, I would say, to pull kids in, especially younger kids, and or even teenagers, and they're quite, I would say, quite effective. And some of them you may not even realize what's happening, especially things like endless scrolling or kind of features within platforms that encourage you to log on multiple times a day or at certain times in the day. I think these are things that are very difficult to avoid, especially at a teenage age. And I do just want to say, I think it is important to play some kind of role maybe in combating these things on a broader scale, considering that a lot of these tricks, they put so much research into these things, and putting them together to kind of hook young people in. And it's really difficult as a young person to recognize these things and avoid them where they're totally engineered to pull you in.
And if I could, what you just shared, you were looking at our communication leader up there and our communication team. We were in a meeting just yesterday around our efforts as a school district. And yes, we are trying to pull you into our messaging. Every platform, every website out there is looking to maximize and increase the number of clicks. So let's, again, while this lawsuit is about social media, I can't think of an entity that isn't attempting to use their platforms, their media platforms, to draw people in, young people and adults.
Do we have a social media policy specifically? And I don't even know what it would be, but I mean, have we explored? I wonder if that's something we need to start looking at, speaking of what you referenced. I mean, the district should consider how to address this within our policies.
We have acceptable use policies. We have instructional usage policies. What we're talking about right now is a ban potentially of social media platforms. That's one policy I've seen from school districts all over the country. And frankly, that's a proxy because young people are finding ways to go past your media. But anyway, so we could talk about banning certain things. We block other things right now currently that we have deemed harmful to young people. If our school district were to decide that social media was harmful, we could block it. But then we would have to make decisions about, do we block CNN? Do we block Facebook? Do we block Fox News, local media sources, and Twitter? Which ones do we block? I think we have, yes. Where is Zach? Yeah, we blocked Facebook.
What's the current?
Please, Zach, help me out up here, brother. Somebody else needs to be quoted on this topic. I was looking
Hi, everyone. Zach Lynn, Chief Information Officer. So there's a couple of distinctions here. In terms when it comes to social media, we have federal guidelines about how and what information students can have access to, and so we have to set up filtering services. You know, we meet probably once a year and chat with students about why and how these are structured. And to your point about time loops, it's the same. You know, it's the same as our students sort of go through our school system. We have those conversations. Sort of and educate new groups over and over. So as it pertains to social media, we don't have policies about student social media use other than we cannot, we're not allowed to dictate that a student use a third-party tool and sort of give away their data. So we have data guidelines and regulations. New York State Ed Law 2D speaks to that. So it could never be a required part of a course or anything like that. We cannot limit the use of a student's social media on their own time and in their own energy. The document that we started out discussing here is really talking about the sort of the negative impact on sort of the emotional state of folks who use it. So that's not something we have the ability to block, but within our filtering system, many of these social media tools are blocked, particularly if they have the ability to access inappropriate content and materials. So in summation, there's guidelines about how we share data and what our students can use. That's Ed Law 2D. And then there's like something called SIPA, which is the Children's Internet Protection Act, which is the federal guidelines, and it limits how we access some of our federal monies. And that's what requires filtering in our school system. So those are sort of like the structural guidelines. But to be very specific, there's no guidelines about social media usage for students in terms of like, are they allowed to use it on their own time? Because that's not under our jurisdiction. But what we often come back to in these discussions is the idea that what we do and how we act on social media is often a manifestation of things that go on in our real world. And our counselors and all of our teams spend a lot of time trying to connect our students and talk to our students, and our teachers talk to our students about sort of connecting that virtual world with the real world, and, you know, messaging someone repeatedly in a harmful way is much like bullying in real life, right? And often those are the same things. So it always comes back to sort of those conversations with our students and the sort of social emotional support that we provide, which gets back to sort of where Dr. Brown's headed on this. I think that covered it. Questions?
I have another one. Thinking about professional development, I don't expect our teachers to be extremely media savvy in the way that like you and I are, because it's our job. Do we have professional development offered for our teachers to like really dig into the nuances of how tough this is for our students and discerning fact from fiction, but also, you know, the baiting and how they're targeted? I mean, there's some things that I think if our teachers could learn more about, they could then educate our students, but I'm not sure they know everything.
So I think broadly speaking, yes. I know we've had some of our teacher librarians lead groups looking at sort of misinformation and how that's spread. Some of that learning actually comes as they go work with students. You know, I know myself, I went into classrooms and talked about the different nuances of social media. But then in even another sense, a lot of our curriculum work is about looking at sort of content and media information from multiple lenses, which is going to get you to a similar outcome, but it may not be as specific.
Well, in our policy 0115R, student harassment and bullying prevention and intervention regulation, it does talk about training for staff. So that can be training against like the results of the impact of social media. But I'm not really in agreement with this statement, because I'd like to know like who is initiating it. Since it says school districts are getting involved, not a school district initiated, and they said about the educational communities, but yet what's the data behind when students actually go on social media? Is it during class time or more at home time or weekend time and all? So they don't provide any of that information, but yet this document to me seems like it's trying to lure us to the side of going with it at the same social media impact that they're talking about.
Yeah. I agree.
One thing that I have found particularly harmful in social media, especially when I have seen it like harmful to me and to my friends, is something that I know that other countries and other states are also exploring lawsuits against, but it's kind of the use of filters, the use of not just appearance enhancement, but the way that it's being used to kind of promote I'm not entirely sure how to say it. I'm sorry, my vocabulary is not that large, but it's kind of promoting a singular quote unquote, I don't believe this at all. So, but good or right body type or certain aspects of diet culture throughout recipes and, you know, again, quote unquote, I don't believe in this at all, healthy alternatives to stuff like, I don't know, Snickers. And I think that that is also an incredibly big issue that I'm not sure if it is addressed in this lawsuit, but I definitely think that it should be included because it really is one of the most damaging things to student, well, not, I want to say, I don't mean to generalize or sound unilateral, but in my opinion, is one of the most damaging things to student mental health. Thanks.
Yeah, sorry, not to put too fine of a point on it, but I do think that there is somewhat of like a really important distinction between social media and other forms of media. Just like recently, the attorneys general of 33 states, they're filing suit against Instagram for many of the similar things. And there's claims like Meta is knowingly and deliberately designing features on Instagram and Facebook to addict children to platforms. And you know, they're citing substantial research that links Instagram and these other social media platforms to depression, anxiety, insomnia in kids. So I think that there's like a really important distinction to be made in between these social media platforms that are deliberately designing these features to keep pulling back kids, in contrast to maybe other social media platforms that are taking advantage of like the modern day of the internet, but maybe not preying on vulnerable younger people.
If I could just piggyback really quickly, sorry. I think it's also that when you get groups like this for social media that will try to manipulate children, sometimes preventative measures are not enough. Obviously, the ideal would be that we could educate every student about how to avoid being preyed upon on the internet. But I think the reality is that because strategies evolve so fast by these corporations, it's very difficult to keep up with that pace. And so there is an argument to be made for more systemic intervention.
I think the difference that you all are pointing out is that general media companies aren't trying to get people addicted to using them. You know, we don't like go and like, I gotta scroll CNN, but we do feel that way about, well, I mean, news junkies do, but no, I mean, the whole, there's research that shows that the likes and the loves and the comments and engagement, I mean, it's all there to trigger your brain to want more and more and more. And Facebook has made an initiative to try to get younger kids and have Facebook kids. So there's a very specific danger to our youth when it comes to this that we cannot ignore. I don't know if the lawsuit's the answer though.
Yeah, I want to segue in because I don't know that the lawsuit is the answer. And I certainly don't think blocking is the answer. And I'll just speak from having lived 4 years in Turkey, where not just in schools, but through the entire country, much was blocked. That you, much media, all kinds, good, bad, and indifferent. As a teacher in a school and as an advisor to a student newspaper in that school, where we could write about absolutely nothing controversial. It was alarming. And just the story about blocking. So countrywide, YouTube was blocked official. But when I would say to my students, oh, I saw this YouTube video that I'd like to show you, but I can't access it. And they'd be like, oh, Miss Lang, don't you know the workaround? And 3 kids would hop up and take over my computer, and they would, in seconds, have what I was looking for. That disturbed me because it was this kind of general countrywide acceptance of people who wanted to access information that, yeah, the government tries to keep us from doing it, but it's not a big deal because we got the workaround. So this is obviously a really complex issue. And I mean, the lawsuits, this one pager, this is a one pager from our law firm, just trying to summarize what is going on. They've signed on to represent school districts in this class action suit. That what they're saying is they want to change the way some of these social media companies operate. That would be the preventive piece. And then they want to hit them in the pocketbook by getting a financial judgment. These companies have very, very deep pockets. And anything that we might benefit as an individual school district is a pittance. And I think that the totality of what any of these companies would end up paying, which is the same as I believe is the case with the jewel suit, is it doesn't hurt them at all. And what teeth are there? Where does the teeth come from to get them to change what they do? I believe in education. Anyone else? I'm off my soapbox now. Okay, moving on. So item 11.4, the OCM postage service contract. Is someone going to speak to us about it?
I can speak real quick. That should probably just be moved to the consent agenda, but I can speak to it real quick. That's just a business item where it's how we purchase Chromebooks, much of the technology infrastructure. Those come through a couple times a year. Yeah, and so, but it will need to be an item that we vote on.
Yeah, but the way it is now, we need a motion.
Yep.
And a second and a vote. Well,
And vote on it now.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Then I move to enter into a 5-year service contract with the Onondaga Portland Madison Board of Cooperative Educational Services, BOCES, in order to furnish certain services to the district pursuant to Education Law 1954 JJ.
Second.
Any questions? All in favor? That's everybody who's still here, I believe. And then we have another item, 11.5, which involves legal notice of public hearing for district safety plan. There are requirements for us to do this, and so I will entertain the motion. Dan will come down. Do you want to say anything? Let's get the motion on the table and then.
I move to direct the district clerk to prepare and publish legal notice of public hearing for district safety plan at 5 p.m. on December 14th, 2023 at York Lecture Hall, Ithaca City School District, 400 Lake Street, Ithaca, New York.
I was just gonna say the timeline that we're gonna post it today. We're gonna notify the Ithaca Journal tomorrow. That starts the 30-day timeline. And then we'll have a hearing on December 14th. It'll be here in York Lecture Hall. It'll be at 5 o'clock. And it'll run for about 30 minutes. That's all I really wanted to say.
Oh. Any questions? All right, all in favor? That's everybody. Thank you. See everyone else. Moving right along, 11.6 and 11.7, we'll vote on them separately, but our athletic mergers, both of them are for our Ithaca girls ice hockey to merge with girls from first we'll look at the one for Vestal. I don't believe the details are in board doc. So let's do the motion and then we'll see if there are any questions.
Moira, do you want it to be a double motion with them merged or separate?
Sure, in the interest of time. I think that's
I'm gonna try it. Okay.
okay.
A motion to approve athletic merger with Vestal School District and Horseheads School District for girls ice hockey for the 2023-2024 school year.
Second.
Question or comment?
My only question is, will this help us field a full team?
Yes.
Yes. Which has been something we want to do. We have expressed that when circumstances prevented us last year from filling a team and having a team.
And I'll just emphasize for public benefit in the attachment, it says no scholar athletes will be displaced from the district.
And that is.
We already have a goalie.
That is.
It's always about the goalie. We're good.
It's uniform with all of our mergers that Ithaca athletes will not be displaced by those from the mergers. Yep.
How does that work? People from Vestal, they go back and forth, or how do people get here, or how?
Yeah, they provide their transportation, so they make they get here to participate.
They provide.
Yes, correct.
We don't.
We don't.
Oh.
Yeah.
We provide from here to games.
Yeah, from here to games.
And back here. Any other questions or comments? All in favor? That's everybody. Thank you. Okay, and then we have item 11.8, which is policy 5500, protection of privacy of student records for a second reading and adoption. And we're gonna have a couple people come down and speak to this.
Hi, Katie Hart, Public Information Specialist. So we were looking at policy 5500, and so the main addition to this policy would be to change our media clearance from an opt-in to an opt-out. We've gone through and made edits to all of the grammar and fixed all the capitalization issues within the policy and separated some of the sections to make them a little bit more clear. And I think last time, I apologize, I missed policy committee meeting last time, but there were some questions around military recruiters. So Dan is joining me to answer some of those.
Thanks. Thanks, Katie. Yeah, so I think you all have, we did a little research and in your folder, you should have the memo from NICED November 16th, 2022. And in it, it talks about how all LEAs, that's us, that receive funding through ESSA and ESEA are required by law to provide military recruiters with student names, addresses, telephone numbers. And there is an opt-out. There is an opt-out from this, which I'll get to in just a second too. This authority supersedes privacy under FERPA, as well as, and then there is an opt-out process. So at the high school, I checked in with the high school. On the beginning of the year, they sent out a packet. And in the packet, you can opt out from this. Now, the information that we're talking about, because I also checked in with the high school and we have a letter from the local military recruiter. The information that they're looking for is student names, first names, last names, middle names, grade level, home address, home telephone. And what they do is this information is set to them electronically in an electronic format. And it's used for training, employment, and scholarship opportunities through the military. So that's some of the information that I found by talking to the high school, and just wanted to open it up to some questions if you have any.
The big thing I see reading this is that you cannot opt in. The LEAs may not withhold access to students' information by implementing an opt-in process. So the opt-out conversation we keep having, this just kind of reinforces doing it, is what which makes your job way easier. Well, for military recruitments, but I mean, just in general, it seems like a process that is in place in other places, which has been a question in our policy meetings.
Yeah, that you officially have to opt out.
Right.
Any other questions? We need a motion.
Motion to approve policy 5500, protection of privacy of student records for second reading and adoption.
Second.
Any other questions or comments?
Just a comment that you helped address Dr. Bradwell's questions from 2 meetings ago. I appreciate that. It's been a good long conversation.
Okay, all in favor? That's everybody. Okay, now we have a very lengthy policy, policy 9110.3. The sexual harassment policy for first reading.
Good evening. I'm Lily Talcott. I get to serve as the deputy superintendent and also the Title IX coordinator for our school district. This is a policy that we've been discussing at policy committee. We took it from the boilerplate version that NISBA suggested and made a number of edits to make it more gender inclusive and to make it match some of the, I would say, more detailed approaches that we take as a school district. Would you like more information?
Question? Comment?
We currently have a policy. We're just, updating it. The law changed last year.
And this is just first reading.
Just first reading.
And it's already been looked at the policy committee a couple of times. It's been worked on a lot. But it will again go back to the policy committee. And then it will come back to us for a second reading and adoption. It's interesting today because I've been doing some contract work for Cornell. And even though my work is entirely remote, I had to go through a whole training online about this very subject. And it had much of the same information. One thing that I thought was useful, and maybe we could do something with this with staff, and maybe with modifications for students too, is that there were a bunch of videos as part of the training where they had people talking about different scenarios. And the questions that arose about how to handle them and then answers to how to handle them. And it really, it was very user friendly, and made a lot of things that when you're just reading all of this, it made it a lot clearer and accessible.
And Moira, remind me, it's delivered as a Canvas course, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that similar to ours?
So we use a platform called Vector Solutions. It's through NYSER, a New York State insurance reciprocal. And NYSER populates and can adjust them for us.
Now, are staff required to go through this?
Yes, every year.
Because that's a New York State law.
Right. Okay.
Correct. That was passed in
Does it have
2018.
Quiz at the end?
Yes, so the law actually states that it has to be interactive.
I
You-
passed quiz.
Via multiple choice, best
Yeah.
form of interaction.
But I thought the videos were really helpful.
So imagine whenever policies go through a first reading, if any board members, not on the policy committee or anything, send questions in the interim, right? We can bring it up at the next
Yeah.
policy meeting and have it addressed.
Great idea.
Yeah.
I'm just as an aside, before I read this motion.
You should do it.
No, I just light bulb, and maybe this is silly, but what if social media was one of those trainings for students to understand the nuances of how dangerous it could be? I don't know if students ever do the trainings or trainings for staff or something. I don't know. Not that we want to add more to our plates, but anyway. Motion to approve policy 9110.3,
Oh, sorry.
sexual harassment policy for first reading.
Second.
Oh, I think Adam. Any other questions or comments? All in favor? That's everybody. And we'll come back to a board meeting near you someday soon.